Hello and welcome to the video for today. It's going to be a overview video which is focusing on religion as a conservative force or as an initiator of social change. The main focus of the objectives for the video today is to understand how religion is a conservative force or initiator of social change, and to start to understand the ideas behind fundamentalism. This is really a foundational lesson of really summarising of everything that we've done, particularly within the lesson where we looked at Weber, and then moving on to fundamentalism, which is going to be the next topic of my videos. Now, throughout the videos, there have been various keywords that have been thrown about. So, conservative force, revolutionary force, all of these ones have been really intricately tied to each one of the perspectives, meaning that we've had to really start to claw these ideas in very early on from the course. Now, this is really, we're going to look at that overview and make sure that we've got everything solidified in our head. So, conservative force, what does it mean? It's religion maintains a status quo and prevents social change, and it's a source of stability. So it is making sure that the traditional norms, values, and beliefs are being reinforced throughout society. As well as that, it could also mean that within society, if we do need to bring it back to the traditional values, then it can be a conservative force in that nature as well. Now, we're going to be looking at the perspectives and how they really consider religion. Now, we've got functionist Marxists and feminists who are really concerned with the idea that religion is a conservative force, maintaining traditional norms and values. Whilst for the neo-Marxists and Weber, religion can be seen as a revolutionary force. We're going to discuss each one of these in detail within this video. Now, functionists have a positive view of the conservative role of religion. It's there to maintain the status quo and the value consensus, which therefore ensures that social solidarity continues within society, and there is no varying or conflicting ideas within society, ensuring that the organism can function appropriately. Religion reinforces norms and values and beliefs through its systems. Now, this little table really has a little overview for you. So we've got the idea, the evidence, and the evaluation here, which is absolutely essential for you to look at. So the idea here, so simply what they believe. So religion is a functional for society, and religion helps maintain order by reinforcing the collective consciousness, and therefore obviously ensuring that we are all operating from the same norm values in society. As well as that, it ensures that we are comforted, allowing the big answers to life to be answered. Meanwhile, religion helps people through stressful situations and prevents disruption. So, as we know with Malinowski and the Trobriand Islands, that they used rituals to really reinforce and ensure that individuals felt comforted if they were ever to wander outside of the area. It helps people integrate into a multi-faith society. Now, this is really where Bella really starts to emerge, with the idea of a civil religion, with a civil religion in itself meaning that we are creating this nationalist idea where our nations are revered in a very similar way in which religions are, which is then providing us with collective ideas and collective notion for one another that religion usually functions as. So now, the evaluation here is focused on the methodological issues. So actually, what are the problems with research like Malinowski's? The sheer focus of it being on small non-literate society is highly problematic because it doesn't really reiterate and confirm the ideas that we maybe have in mainstream society, much like Durkheim with his Australian Aborigines. Is religion really functional? So the idea here that maybe there are other reasons as to what religion really functions as. It can be a source of conflict and disagreement, and the functions really have that rosy-eyed view about religion in this sense. Collective consciousness does not exist. So in the sense here that we are moving towards a more highly individualized society, and the idea of a collective consciousness is really debatable. And religion causes disruption and conflict. Obviously, the main example that you can use here is the example of the Arab Springs, where religion really provided the foundational forces and the combining efforts for the Arab Springs to really take place. The next part that we're moving on to is the Marxists. So Marxists again have a very conservative view on religion. The fact that it is there to maintain and help the bourgeoisie remain in power within the capitalist society, meaning that they can maintain their oppression and ensure that their workforce remains obedient to their needs and wishes. So religion reinforces the norms and values in which benefit the bourgeoisie, and they would do this through the use of scripture and readings of the scripture. Now, this is the overview table for Marx's view of the conservative role of religion. So, religion pacifies the proletariat and prevents rebellion. So, remember, Marx's famous coined term here is it's the opium of the masses, where it numbs and distorts the pain of society and the oppressive forces that the bourgeoisie have put against them. And the way in which they can legitimate this through the evidence is through the divine right of the king. So, the fact that there are people who have been given the right through God and above to ensure that they are in power, meaning that we should accept them and we should listen to them. It legitimizes inequalities and produces a false consciousness where that opium of the masses really kicks in. Now, this is done through the caste system, and the caste system really produces the idea that people are going to be higher than one another, and we've just got to accept our positions because that is our God-given right. If we're going to look at Christianity in terms of the Beatitudes, now the Beatitudes provide a foundational force in which really try to keep the oppressed in the oppressed positions. So, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. By putting this idea forward, we're not going to combat and we're not going to create revolutionary change because do you know what? I am better off being the meek because at the end of the day, I'm going to be one that's better off. So therefore, I'm not going to rebel and I'm not going to go against the status quo in which the bourgeoisie has set up because I will benefit in the end. So it legitimizes my pain, my oppression, and my poverty. Now, therefore, this is dulling the pain of this oppression and exploitation in which the bourgeoisie is really forcing upon them. As an evaluation point here, the neo-Marxist religion can be a liberating force. As we know, Marx and Engels had a very close working relationship with one another. And Engels wrote that religion could have the potential to form and create revolutionary change. Now, the other idea here is secularization, the idea that church and state start to separate from one another. Now, this is problematic because if the main way in which the bourgeoisie are legitimating their power and their inequality is through religion, now with the rise of secularization means that the bourgeoisie are slowly going to lose their grip and hold on society, which could be wholly problematic for them. Now, let's move on to the next slide. Now, we're looking at the feminists. Now, feminists are an increasingly interesting part of this course because they provide a really detailed account as to what and how religion maintains the patriarchal force in society. Now, it's got a negative view and it believes that religion maintains the patriarchal society in which men have created and therefore legitimating the oppression in which women feel within society. Now, religion helps maintain that patriarchal society through the use of scripture and rituals, etc. Now, the best idea here is that, okay, women are forever put into subservient roles. Within many monotheistic religions, women never take the main central stage as the power brokers in that society or in that particular religious group. Instead, they're always subservient, submissive, and obedient. Anything beyond that would be deemed unacceptable. Now, religion reinforces the traditional norms and values and beliefs regarding the role of women in society and ensures that they are the ones that are attending church and are doing the socialisation for the children, rather than being the ones that are potentially changing and creating the discourse or narrative within that particular religious institution. Now, religion helps maintain a patriarchal society. It justifies an inferior position for women. And the example of this is the fact that there are some cases where women cannot and will not be allowed to participate within religious institutions due to biological reasons, therefore making them inferior. So with the Roman Catholic Church, women are still not allowed to be priests, meaning that they are still just the passive attendees within that institution. They are not people who can contribute and change the narrative or discourse within that particular institution. The idea prevents women from gaining equality and regulates behaviour. in this sense here that women are never able to really gain an equal footing in terms of religious institutions, because they are forever legitimated into the position of the subservient or the oppressed, meaning that they're going to start to regulate their behaviour. And the way in which they're going to regulate their behaviour is by putting real firm conditions on how and why the women should be acting in particular manners. Now, it's really legitimating their equality through the use of public and private spheres. Now, public spheres, obviously men are more dominant. Private spheres, women are the most dominant because they're the ones that are socialising children and tending church, etc., whilst they are just there to sit there and absorb the views and the ideology which is promoted throughout the public sphere by the men. Now, women through religion are told to obey men, and this is done through the use of the Bible and, as I said earlier, religious rituals. The main thing that you can draw from this is only for Orthodox Judaism, only men can play a full part in religious ceremonies and become rabbis. And this really here is the main point. So therefore, in Orthodox Judaism, women are unable to maintain and take a power position within society because they are only there to listen and observe. The ideas and the evidence for this is obviously honour killings is one of the main things, where women are seen to be just expendable products, by which if they dishonour themselves or dishonour their families, they are able to be gotten rid of. Meanwhile, Islam, women wearing veil, so this in itself is a very controversial point, and we've discussed quite heavily within our lesson. The fact that women wear a veil is highly oppressive in its nature, because men are controlling as to what and how they can express their sexuality as well as their beauty. Now, that is highly problematic, and it is really just to ensure that women are absorbing and seeing religion as the opium, social opium, meaning that they are very similar in the ideology which is promoted by Kirby, that religion is there to numb the pain of oppression whilst distorting reality. Now, the evaluation points here, women now have opportunities within religions. Now, obviously, within the Church of England from, I believe it was 1994, women are able to become priests, meaning that they are slowly drifting into that public sphere. However, debatably, not enough just yet. Polytheists, so within polytheistic religions, so ones with many gods, women are still represented. However, as we know with goddess theory, women are not the main gods anymore. There will still be more male dominated than women. Veil wearing is not oppressive, so Watson, this is a really controversial point by which I'm going to say, because most of my groups really got wound up by this point. By the idea about Watson is promoting is veiling is a good thing for women because it removes the potential of being sexually harassed, and it ensures that they are just there as a being, not as an object of desire. So really this is a huge evaluation point within the feminist theory in itself. Now, religion as an initiator of social change is a really interesting point, and we have a plethora of examples which we can use and access, which really demonstrate this point really clearly. So, opposing the view that religion operates as a conservative force is the idea that religion can bring about social change, and the two theories in which we're going to look at for this are neo-Marxist and the work of Weber. Now, the main writers for this particular point is Engels, Majura and Gramsci. So religion does not always operate in the interests of the ruling class. In fact, sometimes it can work in the interests of the oppressed. Now, religion can be used as a means of liberation for the poor, and this can be aid social change as a result. An example that we can use here is through liberation theology. Now, liberation theology, to illustrate this point, is when the Catholic Church in Latin America sided with the bourgeoisie and the right-wing military dictatorship in Latin American countries, such as El Salvador and Nicaragua. The Catholic Church gave little support to trade union strikers and oppositional political parties. However, Catholic priests began to speak up for the interests of the poor, some priests developed a new theology which interpreted Christianity as being on the side of the oppressed groups and supporting their liberation. Now, liberation theology therefore developed, which argued the power and wealth, especially land, should be redistributed from the rich to the poor, meaning that those individuals were given a new set of religious beliefs, which then helped them to combat against the opium, that false consciousness which sometimes is really rife within society, giving them autonomy from that religious oppression, meaning that we can then create change, we can create movement, which will then benefit us in the long run. Now, Weber was all about the idea that religion can provide a format for society's change with it. Now, he examined the religion of Calvinism within his book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Now, the main bit here is Calvinists followed the idea of chosen elect. Now, this related in the salvation panic, by which they did not know that they were amongst the elect, because this was something that was predesignated from birth. So, this resulted in the followers really working hard and developing this ascetic lifestyle. Now, this ascetic lifestyle provided them the means to ensure and promote the ideas of frugality, self-discipline, and self-denial. Now, they were then really reiterated and told to work hard, save, and because if you are, that will win you God's grace and that will get you into heaven. Now, this then resulted in the reinvestment of money because we wanted to get as much money, which is really the profiteering motive behind it, was removed. And that greed element that once was the seven deadly sin was removed as well from the individual's understandings of the world. So they reinvested within businesses, which then gave the correct superstructure, well, the economic base, to thrive for capitalism to then ensue. Now, Weber claims that this is not the only cause of capitalism. However, it did provide the foundational forces for capitalism to flourish. Therefore, through the use of the Protestant work ethic, we were then able to see that society changed. Now, obviously, that is one way in which a religion can create a positive movement. Now, the evaluation for Weber is the following. So, the strength, Weber recognises that there is a relationship between the economy and religion. So, therefore, it's less deterministic in its nature. He's seeing that, okay, they can interact and they work with one another. There isn't just two separate institutions which do not interact with one another. Weaknesses. Weber overstates the idea that capitalism was a result of Calvinism. As we know, within some countries such as Scotland, Switzerland and Hungary, and parts of the Netherlands, where they were strongly Calvinist, capitalism did not flourish, meaning that, okay, maybe there are other functions or areas that we need to look at that then helped capitalism to flourish. Places with strong Calvinist populations did not industrialise, as I've mentioned earlier. So this really ensures that we need to look at other areas as well. And Kautsky, capitalism precedes Calvinism. So the ideas and the promotion of capitalism actually happened before and predated Protestantism, meaning that, okay, there may be other elements that then create that revolutionary change rather than the Calvinist or Protestant ethics. Now, it is widely accepted that religion can cause social change. The question has moved on to in what circumstances religion tends to be conservative, prevents change, and what sometimes leads to religion being a radical force for change. Now, as we've discussed earlier, and several of these examples are really hammered into this PowerPoint already, is that there is evidence and good substantial evidence where religion can bring about social change. So we've got liberation theology within Latin American countries, which we've already discussed in detail when I was looked at neo-Marxism. We've got Martin Luther King, who supported the civil rights movement, and he used the ideas which Christianity promoted to ensure and preach and ensure that there was a great movement and motivation for change to happen. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who opposed the ideas of apartheid, so the separations of blacks and whites within South Africa. Now, he used Christianity and the ideals in which the Bible promoted to then really reteach and get people to think about how this was not an okay situation to have. and then the Iranian Revolution, which really promoted the idea that a society that vastly changed to a westernized country, um, and how religion then reacted and brought that society back to those traditional views and values because it didn't want to see it losing its mainstream appeal. Now, recent examples of how religion can obviously create some form of change. So, the 9/11 attacks on the USA by the Islamic organization Al Qaeda, which resulted in a significant change in US foreign policy, including the invasion of Afghanistan, and to some extent were used to justify the invasion of Iraq. Now, both these policies led to the regime changes in these countries. In Afghanistan, resistance by the Islamic Mujahideen led to the expulsion of occupying forces of the Soviet Union in 1989. This resulted in the Taliban taking control in 1996, imposing Islamic law before that in turn lost control in some parts of the country to the US due to the 9/11 attacks. So you can see how religion can be a force for change. So we can use the idea that obviously the Islamic force, which tried to change in the US, really combated against with the terrorist attacks, led to foreign policy change, which then led to an invasion of the Iraq and Afghanistan, which obviously was a result of their original invasion of Afghanistan by the Al Qaeda in 1989. Now, the factors that can shape the power of religion to cause change were really promoted by the idea Maguire, and he claims that the following factors are important for this religion to create change. Beliefs. Now, religion that emphasises strong moral codes are more likely to produce members who will be critical or challenge social injustice. So, Protestantism has more impact than Buddhism because it's teaching the idea of activism, movement, and utilising that force of community. So, the example here is Reverend Martin Luther King headed the Black Civil Rights Campaign of the 1960s, which then mobilised a force and created a big belief system in which this was not a right thing to have or operate within our society. So let's stand up and let's make a change. Culture. So, in cultures where religious belief plays a central role, then anyone wishing to change society is more likely to use religion to help them. So, we have to legitimate any form of change within that culture. If it is central, then we have to use that culture to benefit us and create a discourse or a new narrative within that society. However, as we look at the Church of England, which is separate and it's different from our culture, we won't really be able to utilise that and as a narrative or force within social change. Social location. So when religious organisations play a central role in political life, there is important opportunity for it to influence social change. Now, the main point here is we look at churches, we look at mosques, we look at any of these religious organisations. The main worshipping areas or the main grounds for worshipping tend to be very central within the community. Now, these then act as a place for people to meet and then to mobilise. Now, an example that really we can bring in here is the idea when we look at the Arab Springs. The Arab Springs, they all met at mosques, and within those mosques, they then were preached and they had their religious movements all reiterated at that point. This then gave them a central location all to act from and create change from. Internal organisation. So religion with a strong centralised source of authority have more chance of affecting events. However, this can have the opposite effects by restraining parts of its organisation. So obviously if the Pope dictates something is going to change, it will then create change. So by having people and a hierarchy in place will be useful in terms of creating a new narrative within society. Now, religion, conflict, and theories here. Now, whether religion can be a force for change or not is closely related to whether it causes conflict, as when it does, and this can lead to change. Now, Weber, Marx, and functionalists address this. Now, functionalism argues that religion is to prevent conflicts by creating harmony through shared values. Meanwhile, Marxists and feminists both claim that religion can prevent conflicts by reinforcing the control of dominant groups in society, so the ruling class in the case of Marxism and men in the case of feminism, so maintaining that patriarchal society. Now, Weber recognises that religion can cause conflict as well as harmony. So initially, it may cause conflict in terms of changing the economic base. However, then ultimately, it leads that harmonious environment to ensue. So then everyone starts to share and have new values in terms of it all. Now, other perspectives point out religion can cause conflict without leading to change. Now, examples of religion causing conflict. Now, there are many examples of religion being linked to conflict, e.g., between Protestant and Catholics in Northern Ireland, Muslim Palestinians and Jewish Israelis in the Middle East, Orthodox Serbs, Catholic Croatians, and Muslims in Bosnia during the 1990s, and the Muslim and Hindus in the Indian subcontinent. Some theories have begun to claim religion causes conflict, such as we've previously discussed. Now, Samuel Huntington in 1993 really starts to bring about a new idea within this, and it's an idea which really starts to give some concrete definition as to what we are looking at here. Now, he argues that people see themselves as belonging to civilizations that are usually linked to a religion, and therefore religious identities are increasingly important to the modern world. Now, these civilizations are following, so Western, Confucian, so which is China, Japanese, Islamic, Hindu, Slavic Orthodox, Latin America, and Africa. All of these different ideas or these different civilizations have got some religious ideology tied to them, which therefore is integral and absolutely important for their ideas and their identities. Now, when these civilizations come into contact, conflict tends to break out. So, for example, conflict between Islamic and Western civilizations. As you can see there, I'm just zooming into the map there. The blue bit there is the Western part, and then this little bit, which I'm going to circle, 1 second, there, I hope we can see that. That bit that I'm circling, which is like a weird colour brown, that would be the Islamic part of it all. Now, those two civilizations will be in conflict with one another, so the blue with the brown, meaning that obviously they're going to have very different ideologies as to how they believe society should operate and function. Now, conflict can always occur. It doesn't always necessarily have to be a result of a religious problem. Now, it often can be argued that conflicts apparently based on religion are often really about other issues. So, for example, Northern Ireland, the conflict was about the UK and EIRE, Scotland and Ireland controlling the north, while in the Middle East, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it's about the control over land. So where, the borders are really being drawn. So when we're looking at conflict, we mustn't ignore just the basics here. They may just be a basic in the idea of policy which is being implemented, or the boundaries which are drawn within the lands. Now, this is something which we really need to investigate further, because it can really just be as simple as a border issue tied up with a little bit of religious ideology, rather than religion being the main force for that conflict. Now, Karen Armstrong is one of the authors in which I use quite frequently with my lessons. So when we look at fundamentalism, Karen Armstrong is going to appear again. When we did feminism, Karen Armstrong appeared there as well. So she is a theorist which you really need to pay attention to. She's got some fantastic ideas. When we're looking at religion, she provides a good basis for us. And she argues that conflict between Islam and the West is not primarily caused by religion, but by the American foreign policy. The USA has frequently intervened in Muslim countries and often supported regimes that have not brought prosperity to ordinary Muslims. So therefore meaning that there is a problem with the policy that is being used and being implemented by the West, which then causes conflict with the Islamic civilizations. Meaning that maybe actually we need to look at this policy rather than just blaming it on religion. So there may be other features which we need to investigate. Steve Bruce is another chap which you need to take note of. He appears several times throughout my PowerPoints. He claims that religious factors are often intermingled with non-religious factors in causing conflict. He cites the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, where nationality and ethnicity are intermingled with religious differences. Now, really, we've covered everything. We've looked at all the main perspectives. We've looked at Karen Armstrong, Steve Bruce, Samuel Huntington, which provided us some fantastic discussions and examples which we can use. Now, let's conclude this PowerPoint. Now, the arguments discussed show that there is a clear relationship between religion and social change, which we cannot deny. Religion and social change are often intermingled with one another. However, much debate is whether change is prevented or promoted through religion. As well as that, is religion the central theme or promoter of that change, in which we need to look at further, because there may just be other things which are at play, which are then creating that change as a result. Now, that is the end of the video there. I am going to be doing fundamentalism very soon.